Welcome you Sunday at 7. And just to let you know that every Sunday night we do have communion. And so, even if you go to Sunday morning service and you don't want to stick around for the message again, because you heard it already, if you want to just come and you just want to sit before the Lord and partake in communion and just worship for a while, that is like completely available. And sometimes that's just like a needed thing. And so like our Sunday at 7, it's always like the celebration of the priesthood of believers, right? God has made us a royal priesthood, the scripture tells us. That means we have direct access to Jesus. We don't need some person in between us. We go straight to him. And so that's why we celebrate communion the way we do on Sunday evening. Okay, but Tonight, Mateo was with us last week, and that was awesome. Mateo's still with us. He's going to be leaving on Tuesday, and so you get to talk to him tonight, and then that's really going to be about it, okay? So he was with us last week, and it was an amazing time, and Ephraim came out on Thursday. We've been praying for him all week. Actually, for about the last month, we've been praying for his visa, Canadian visa, this and that, and he came. Thursday he landed, he taught our Thursday night study, and it was like amazing. He gave his testimony, and tonight Ephraim is going to share with us. He is a very blessed brother. I mean, he's been a good friend of mine for over, 14, over 10 years. It's been a while. We have walked together many times. And so, if you would please welcome Ephraim Disi.
Thank you very much. Good evening once again. My intention, especially for wanting to share with you, is not to bring sorrow or to be heartbroken, but to encourage you. Last Thursday I said, God's grace is not without effect on our lives. It has a purpose on our lives for each and every situation. So before I go into my presentation, I would like us to read from Philippians chapter 1, verses 12. Philippians chapter 1, verses 12. Paul says, "Now I want you to know, brothers, that what has happened to me has really served to advance the gospel." Paul was in chains. And someone in chains to say that these chains are not binding me not to preach about the gospel, but they really helped him to preach the gospel. So in the same vein, we might also be facing some challenges. Those challenges will help us to preach the gospel. Amen. And my presentation is just to give you a highlight of the basics of HIV and AIDS, not globally, but also concerning Malawi and Africa in general. This is the world statistics, but this is outdated in 2003. The red spots are the Southern Africa. Population says the population of the world is 7 billion, and Southern Africa contributes 10% of that population. But in case of HIV and AIDS, Africa carries 70%. So you can imagine someone weighing 10 kg carrying a bag weighing 70 kg. That's how we will look at it. So Southern Africa carries the heavy burden of HIV and AIDS. How does the HIV attacks the system? Our body is protected by the immune system made up of white blood cells. In the medical field, I think that is well known. So, as you see, the yellow man is the white blood protecting this man who is wearing red. So when HIV attacks, it does not attack, it attacks the body system or the defense mechanism. And when HIV is coming, the white blood cells will try to react to defend the body against the germs, but the struggle will still go on, And then the white blood cells, in the end, the HIV will always win. So HIV is very strong, a germ that attacks the white blood cells themselves. It does not attack the body itself first, so it attacks the white blood cells. After a long struggle, the HIV kills most of our white blood cells, leaving the body unprotected. That's how it looks in our body. So that's how we teach people to know the struggle that they face if they are attacked by HIV. And in the end, AIDS is the victor. And in that case, when the body has no white blood cells, they are defeated, there are many other secondary diseases. Last time I mentioned that I was attacked by shingles. That's one of the effects, because the white blood cells are no longer there. You can suffer from TB, cancer, diarrhea. They will come because the white blood cells are no longer there. Then there are some stages of illness from HIV and AIDS, from AIDS infection. So sometimes you can be a healthy HIV carrier for 10 years without knowing, unless if you test. And sometimes glands develop over the body. Sometimes you suffer from minor opportunistic infections, and sometimes you progress to AIDS. And sometimes it can lead to death. But it does not go always in that way. It can also have an acute illness and go to AIDS and sometimes lead to death if you do nothing. That's if you don't take any medication, you don't go for a test. That's how the HIV cycle goes. So it can go in all those directions. It will depend, unless if you have taken medication and then you have started to treat the opportunistic infections. The progression of HIV, this gap is the first maybe indication that someone has now HIV. But still, it will take some time before he knows or she knows. And then that is a window period where someone would know that I'm now infected. She will need to do something on that. This test would not show any symptoms, asymptomatic. There are no symptoms of HIV and AIDS at that particular time. And then there will be recurrent minor sicknesses that will lead to your health being attacked. So all those gaps going down are called AIDS-defining illnesses, the progression and deterioration, and that will also lead to death. Our body system, on my left side, that's the body mechanism. The CD4 count, mostly it's 1,000. And on the other side, this is the viral load, the amount of viruses in our body. So you can tell the amount of viruses are in millions, but the body systems is in thousands. So you can tell that most of the times the viral load will always win. If the viral load is not, if the person does not take any medication, the health will drop and it will pick up after some time if you have taken some medication. And this will lead from 0 to 12 months. And now the antibodies will start fighting the virus. And then someone can, as I said, someone can live 8 to 10 years without knowing that he's infected, unless if he tests. And then the last 2 years, somehow, the illnesses now will also start to show. So we need also to take action on that. And then that will lead to the, your health now will also slide down. That's how the picture of the body would look like in the medical field. And then that is what we call seroconversions, that when that person now knows that I'm HIV positive, and then he needs to take action at that particular time. At that stage, no symptoms are seen, and then symptoms start to show, and then it can lead to AIDS. And at times, it leads to death if no action is taken. In my case, I call it as a Lazarus effect. You know the story of Lazarus. I was once dead, but now I am alive. Praise be to God. Thank you. I'll skip the test. The risk and conditions of HIV. There should be a quantity. The quantity of virus must be enough so that one can also know. And also there should be an entry point where HIV can enter into the blood system. And also there should be sexual transmitted infections. And nowadays in Malawi and in Africa, there's this challenge, I don't know here, especially in the in schools, where we say sexual transmitted diseases. There are now sexual transmitted degrees. Girls who want high marks. And in that course, they also get infections. You get the point. So we need to tell the people how they can abstain during that time. AIDS cases in Southern Africa, the homosexual percentage is very small, but the heterosexual transmission is very high, 79%. So we don't want to blame or to blame shifting or finger pointing, because the history indicates that the first cases of HIV and AIDS started with homosexuals. But now the heterosexuals are also being attacked. So there's no need for finger pointing. What we need to do is to fight the disease. And the other percentages are mother to baby are 13%. But now the governments in Africa and in the world, they're trying as much as possible to defeat that. Blood transfusion blood is being screened, so there are less HIV/AIDS cases that are transmitted by blood because blood is now being screened. Blood and blood products. On Thursday, one of our brothers mentioned about drug users. Drug use in Africa and Malawi is very minimal, but in most cases, it was blood transfusion, needle pricks in the hospitals. In the course of duty, also people can take HIV and AIDS. During pregnancy, during birth, and during breastfeeding. That's why now the governments are trying as much as possible. When women are pregnant, they should go for an HIV test. Immediately they are tested HIV positive, they are immediately put on medication, so that when the baby is born HIV negative. So there are steps that are being taken to address that problem. This is another big case. A question also was asked last Thursday. These two guys, a boy and a girl, are in love. But this other guy has another friend. And this other guy has another friend. This is what we call a social sexual network. And in Africa, we call it multiple sexual concurrent partnerships. That's another problem that is affecting Malawi and the world. And this is a problem. This other guy on the left might be faithful to one sexual partner, but the other guys are not faithful. So that's why we need to say people need to know how to protect themselves. You just not need to trust, but also you need to believe that my friend is also faithful to me alone. That's how HIV will attack. And in the sexual network, some of the people in that group may not be infected because it will depend how they do their sex. So that's how HIV and AIDS now in Africa is spreading, multiple sexual concurrent partnerships. HIV is not transmitted in a bus. HIV is transmitted by playing football or other social gathering in the church. HIV is only transmitted, is not transmitted by using the same toilets. It's not transmitted by mosquitoes. Because people ask questions, what about mosquitoes? Mosquitoes do not transmit HIV and AIDS. Because in Malawi, we have some areas where there are many mosquitoes. So we could have many cases of HIV. But mosquitoes do not transmit HIV. This is the end of the slide. And now, what I wanted to speak, now that we know there's this other problem, the challenge of stigma. How do we defeat stigma? Defeating HIV and AIDS-related stigma. Globally, millions have died. Many more are living with HIV. Sub-Saharan Africa is the worst affected, as we have seen the presentation. And most HIV and AIDS infections, deaths are preventable if we can defeat stigma. What does stigma do? It frustrates prevention, care, and treatment efforts. And sometimes it leads to fear, shame associated with it that keeps people from learning or disclosing their HIV status. And also changing their behaviors for self-protections and the protections of others. Caring for those who are HIV positive, because of the myth that people believe on HIV, some people will desist of caring their sick relatives. So that's part of stigma. And also seeking and utilizing information and skills and services related to HIV and AIDS. But also stigma intensifies emotional pain and suffering. I've seen many people who would come to me that maybe they have been neglected because they are HIV positive. We'll come in and assist them to defeat that kind of stigma. And also it negates and reduces the chances of those who are stigmatized. Many people have died not of HIV and AIDS, but they have died because they have been stigmatized. So that's how we as a church, as a faith community, we need to come in and also bridge the gap, bring love where people are heartbroken. I will skip I think you know about this definition of stigma. That's not an issue. But there are many types of stigma. There is what we call self-stigma. You believe and internalize negative attitudes and reactions from others. When people start pointing fingers and you believe what people are talking about you. In 2008, I was doing HIV and AIDS seminar for pastors. And one of the pastors stood up and said, "Excuse me, sir, my belief is that those people who are HIV positive deserve it." And I was on the podium. So you can tell, but the way I answered to him, it's like, my brother, people will not know how they got their HIV. But for you as a pastor to talk like that, I don't know how many in your church would come to you and say, "Pastor, I'm HIV positive." In 2006, I went to Switzerland. As I was testifying, the pastor was not comfortable. And he said I should stop talking. But after we went out, his wife said, "My pastor, thank you very much for sharing. In this church, we have 30 people who are HIV positive." So the pastor's wife knew, but the pastor didn't know. So we need to defeat that stigma. People want to come and share with us. They want to open up to us when they are struggling. And sometimes self-stigma, we fail to accept ourselves. We need to accept. This is a condition. We did not go around to deserve that kind of illness, but we need also to accept. Sometimes people overblame themselves. They don't take action. And also, sometimes they believe they're incompetent, useless, and very dangerous, and they might be dying soon. And also, they're too bad, too dated to be forgiven and accepted. It doesn't matter how you got infected, but if you accept yourself and trust in God, God is going to save you. There is societal stigma, people who inaccurately blame you, and also people who talk and conduct themselves in ways that target and feel devalued, and you also feel ashamed, worthless, or guilt, and you be discriminated against as a result of HIV and infection or AIDS-related illnesses, whether in places of worship, places of work, it depends. But once information is passed, people who have got the information, people can defeat HIV-related stigma. Manifestations of stigma, you start to isolate yourself, shame, guilt, and self-hate, sometimes denial, desperation, and you also withdraw from people. You don't want to go to church. Sometimes self-destructive behavior and tendencies. People who are societal stigma, people who point fingers, unkind whispers and gossip, hurting statements, rejection, isolation, and in Malawi, even starvation. People will not want to feed you because you're HIV positive. And sometimes people will be withholding their love, care, and support, and sometimes treatment. But now, through the education of this, what we're doing, people now understand that this is not the way we have to live. And sometimes there's torture and also physical or spiritual torture. And physical violence and killing. This happened in South Africa. One lady came into the open and disclosed HIV status. The community there stoned her and burned her to death just because she disclosed her. So there's those kind of stigma. And mistreatment of corpse. Sometimes when you die, people don't want to come near your corpse because that's part of stigma. And also the surviving family will be ridiculed because their relatives have died of HIV and AIDS-related illness. But what are reactions to stigma? Denial. Sometimes we rationalize AIDS problem as not present or as not serious. Or we try to avoid, we try to erase anything that associate us with HIV people or people living with HIV and AIDS. And sometimes we are aggressive. We want to punish or retaliate to those who believe that we are the cause of the problem. We try to say, these are the cause of the problem, let us punish them. The impact of HIV-related AIDS stigma. AIDS, it drives AIDS epidemic underground. Now people say it's better to remain silent. It's better not to disclose. And in that case, in that cause, they continue infecting or transmitting HIV. And people die from preventable, postponable, and manageable conditions because of stigma that is out there. People continue to be infected, they continue to get sick, they continue to die, widowed and orphaned needlessly, which is not the case now. And also the quality and quantity of life is also reduced. And this is the cycle of stigma, as you see, that there is hopelessness, despair, resignation, infection, early death, sicknesses, orphans and widows, and also there's reduced quantity of life because the stigma that surrounds HIV and AIDS. What is our duty in our community, in our faith communities, in our families? First, we need to find out the size and the nature of the problem. We need to develop training tools and programs. How are we going to intervene to mitigate the impact of HIV? We also need to develop and expand congregational responses which are non-judgmental, caring, and compassionate in our faith communities. We should also be role models. We should overcome negative fear and also stigma. We should also preach and restore hope. Become part and advocacy against stigma. Our duty continues. We need to revisit our religious languages, doctrines, and private messages. Sometimes people will misquote the Bible, like there's Deuteronomy chapter 28, I think, verses 22, that God is going to punish you with different kinds of sicknesses. And you're preaching to people who are already affected and infected by HIV and AIDS. So we need to revisit that. But also we need to explain the difference between what is lawful and what is safe. And why people refuse and fail to change their behavior. Individual and social morality, risk and unsafe behavior, and versus risk and unsafe environments. We need to affirm and support the ministry of people infected or affected by at all levels. We also need to initiate Hope Awards for collective and corporate leadership against stigma, plan and observe Day Africa of Fasting against HIV and AIDS-related stigma, shame, denial, discrimination, inaction, and misaction. We need also to evaluate our 6 Ps for stigma reductions. How do we have our policies in our faith communities, in our societies, have our good plans, our programs, have good personnel who are going to work in those programs, and also develop partnership, and also birth that with prayer. This is what we explain. This is safe and unsafe, lawful and unlawful. In any situation, there are 4 groups of people. The first group might be doing things unlawful, in a sinful way, but in a safe way. And the second group might be doing sex unlawful, but in an unsafe way. Because especially the second group is more dangerous. When they are affected, they say, I don't want to die alone. They continue infecting and affecting one another. And the third group, who have their sex, they are married lawfully, but they don't know the status of their partner, and their sex is unsafe. But the fourth group that we need is having a lawful sex and also safe, because now you know the status of your sexual partner, then you know how to prevent HIV. And they are doing God's will. Yes, these people don't know, but they are unable and don't care. Sometimes they are refusing or failing to change. They are taking responsibility, but in the sight of God, they are also sinning. But these ones are at risk without knowing. So we have those different kind of people in our societies. So we need to explain how they are going to manage, or how they are going to manage HIV and AIDS infection. Our duty. We have moved, the message that we used to preach was ABC, abstain, be faithful, and condomize. But now, there are many young people who are now 25 to 30 years who were born HIV positive. They have never had sex. And how do you tell them to abstain when they are already HIV positive? But still we cannot leave them out. We have a message for them. Yes, you are HIV positive, you still need to abstain. When you get married, you have to be faithful. Because of your HIV status, you have to protect yourself. You get the point? So the ABC message, at that time, the saved message is like what we're saying, have safer sex practices, and also safer sexual practices are, in Malawi, we have added harmful eliminate harmful cultural practices. It doesn't happen here, but in Malawi, you have some cultures where, for instance, if I die, my brother would come and have sex with my wife. Cleansing, sexual cleansing. So that kind of sexual practice must be eradicated because it's one way of spreading of HIV and AIDS. So we need safer practices and also access to treatment. If people have known their status, they must have access to treatment, but also encourage them to go for voluntary counseling and testing. And also they should be empowered. And also, after they have been empowered, disease preventions will be controlled. Conclusion: stigma cannot be wished away, but efforts that is greater than the stigma prevalence, the incidences will eventually defeat the problem. We will never overcome stigma related to HIV and AIDS until we are able to accept all people, male or female, slave or free, Greek or Jew, as equal and having equal value in the sight of God. The question that we will continue to ask ourselves is not only on the question where we have experienced stigma, but also where have I stigmatized? Sometimes we always try to say, I've been stigmatized, people are stigmatizing other people. But sometimes even people who are HIV positive stigmatize other people. It's not only experiencing stigma, but have you also stigmatized other people? Thank you very much.
Few minutes, and so what we'll do is we will open it up for questions. You could, if you have questions in regards to what's happening in Sub-Sahara or what's happening just in general worldwide. Ephraim speaks around the world teaching leadership on HIV and AIDS. So you ask him, if you have questions, feel free to ask, even what it looks like on the ground, whatever you guys have questions about.
Yes.
Dark red.
It's in the red zone.
Yeah, the dark red is more than the other ones.
Brother Lou, could you slide to the other one?
It's in double digits. It was like, yeah, first or second.
The flags, first line.
Right. This is where we are right here. Zambia, Mozambique, Zimbabwe. Botswana's below that. All of those are like double digits.
So those are called the Sub-Saharan Africa, where the most AIDS cases are. So it's about the population of people living with HIV and AIDS worldwide is 35 million, but Sub-Saharan Africa is 25 million.
70% of the world's cases are on 10% of the world's population.
So we carry the heaviest burden.
And that's not including all the people that have died.
Yes, not yes.
Because there's those waves of death
have
that came that were horrible. Other questions? Yeah.
So because of the cultural stigma there, is there also stigma for the children that are left behind?
That's a good question.
Yes, there used to be stigma for children and mothers who are left away, and that's why we had a problem, what we call child-headed families, because people didn't want to take care of the orphans. So the orphans would just regroup with themselves, and maybe 10, 11, start a family. And it was very hard. But now, people now with information, some people have integrated the children into their families, and some have introduced orphan care, which is very good. So these are the problem now is at least a little bit less than it used to be 10, 20 years ago. Yes.
That's why we also have our feeding centers too. Same reason. Yeah, Ross.
Testing now is everywhere. We have mobile, we have every places now people can go for a test. But the only problem is, as I mentioned, people do not want to know because they don't want to be stigmatized. But testing is everywhere and it's also free. And last Thursday I mentioned that in our time when we tested, it took 2 weeks. But now it only takes 5 minutes. So testing is,
Wow,
yeah,
it's
5
only
minutes,
5
you know.
minutes.
Yeah,
Okay.
5 minutes, you know. So, yeah. Medication in Malawi, the medication supply is very good, no problem.
And it's free.
And
right?
it's free, and it's
Yes.
free. Yes.
So, yeah, it's free.
It's
It's
free.
free in Malawi. It's free in a lot of the nations.
It's
in
free in a lot of the
Sub-Sahara.
nation, but also, but in Malawi we have challenges because we are surrounded by Mozambique. So many people now from Mozambique come to Malawi
Yes.
to access medication. Yeah. Yes. Which doctors?
Okay, so the witch doctors giving false prescriptions for curing.
Yeah. Recently, the government is trying to bring all the traditional healers together, because even in the newspapers, they are flighting the advertisements that this is my medication, you can get healed of HIV, and they're saying, up to now, there's no known cure of HIV, and so it's being discouraged. And that's one of the misactions that people leave medication to go for the traditional medicine, and it's also, they compromise their health. So there's no known cure. Witch doctors, they're only there to make money. Yes. Yes, Dave. They say 90% of people who are HIV positive don't know that they're HIV positive. And now the campaign that is there for World AIDS or World Health Organization is the 90-90-90 target, which means if 90% of people who are HIV positive know their HIV status, the 90% will go on a medication, and then the 90% will still be alive. So that is the target. So now it's encouraging people to come for a test. There's medication. You can still live. So that's now the new strategy that they are using. That if 90% of people who are HIV positive know their status, they will be immediately put on medication, and also they can be retained. It's still on voluntary basis. That's another, yeah, sure. It's not mandatory, yes. Yes.
The ARVs.
The type of medication, yeah, the type of medication that we used to have was Trimune, but now we changed to the Trimune we used to take in the morning and in the evening. Now we have only the tablet that they are calling it 5A, that we only take once a day, the recommended one. Yes. Yes. Yes, nutrition and medication must also go together. Yes. Thank you. Yes, Kim, Leslie.
Oh, okay. So putting a borehole in. So let's say like in one of the villages where they traveled many miles and the women had to sleep out at night. How can a borehole close to that village help prevent AIDS? Why does it help prevent AIDS? That's what's kind of being asked.
Now, because what we say, people who are HIV positive must also have access to clean water. So it can prevent, because in a way, spending a night, like spending the whole night, especially when you're married, you spend the whole night at the borehole. Sometimes it creates suspicion, which is not very good. So bringing a borehole into that village will reduce suspicions within that family or within that village. So it will really help greatly much.
Yeah. So it reduces suspicion, temptations, and so forth, instead of being out all night.
Because the husbands will say, 7 hours drawing water, I don't believe you were drawing water, you were somewhere else. So the beatings, the violence can also be reduced. So it can be reduced, that kind of thing. Yeah, most of the things, what we are trying to do is not only to encourage disclosure, but also to prepare the community to accept those people who are HIV positive. Because sometimes we say, now that you have tested, disclose. Disclosure is a process. You cannot just go and test and start disclosing. But you need to know the temperament of the people, how they accept you. Sometimes you cannot disclose to your immediate family, you can disclose to the church, and you want to avoid the gossiping, things like that. Then you need to educate both the person who is going to disclose and the community that is going to stay, so that they accept one another. And then they should know the ways of transmission, that living with this person who is HIV positive, you are not going to get HIV. He's just normal as you. So the attitude must also be addressed. Because at first it was like HIV would just fly over. But now people have to be educated on that. So acceptance. First, accept myself, and then secondly, the community, my family, must accept me to reject that stigma.
And then the follow-up was, what can we do? What can we do further?
What can we do further?
Yeah, as a church body right here.
Yes, the church body, we speak about, especially, as I said, preaching, using the word of God, and teach about how the love of Jesus encompasses that. The love of Jesus does not choose who to love and not to love. I always give a text on John chapter 21, I think verse 21, where Peter says, is pointing to this guy, Jesus, this one too, it's part of stigma. And Jesus says, if I say he should remain until I come, what is it wrong with you? You follow me. So we just need to follow Jesus. I should not look at other people. Myself, I'm HIV positive, I should follow Jesus. You're HIV negative, let's follow Jesus. So preaching about God's love will also help. Teach about God's love. Yes. Yes, Renee? I didn't get it.
So, is the government preaching the message on AIDS and how it's spread, prevention, or is it just like you and the other pastors that are passing it on to the villages, making sure it gets out into the villages?
The government is preaching, but in a different way. So we are involved in a different way. So, the message from the government, it's a healthy problem. But for us, we need now to use the word of God, because now the government, there's a fight. Distribute condoms, and the church says not distribution of condoms. So the approach is different from the government than from the church. So we need, as a church, to educate our people before they know anything about condoms. So the approach from the government, yes, they are teaching, but in a different way. So we as a church must be involved in a different way. Yes.
Are we good? All right. And, if you want to talk to Ephraim, if you want to talk to Matea, they are around, okay? They're around tonight, and so feel free to ask them questions. If you have questions in regards to the ministries that we are doing in Malawi, that we're joined in doing with Ephraim and Matea, feel free to ask. I mean, there's lots of different areas of ministry that we're involved with, whether it be the feeding centers or the pastors that we send out or help support with the iSend program, or, putting in boreholes, feeding the refugee camps, and on the projects go. So feel free to ask as you will. Be with these guys, meet them. If you guys need prayer, they're available. They'll pray over you as well. Okay? God bless you guys. Have a great evening.
Let's pray. I wanted to finish.
Something.
I wanted to close with the words from Isaiah 65, verse 17, which says, "Behold, I create a new heavens and a new earth. The former things will not be there, nor the things will be remembered, nor will they come to mind." God is creating a new heaven where the past is not going to be remembered. So let us stick to God. God is going to protect us. Amen.